Hands together for Wycombe Wanderers defender Jason McCarthy, please.
Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. So I guess tonight I'm just going to give you a little journey into my faith and how I met the Lord. It's been not, a normal journey for me in terms of how I've met God and how I've become a Christian. I wasn't born in a Christian home. Neither was my wife now. So I didn't have any sort of idea in my family of who God was or what God actually, who he represented and the need for God. So it's funny because we'd always have that conversation around the dinner table, like, do you believe in God? And I was always fascinated by the idea. And looking back now, I always felt like someone was with me, someone was watching over me. But I didn't know what it was. Anyway, when I was about, I'll probably talk you through my footballing career. It's probably the best way to sort of explain it and how I sort of come into the faith. So I came through the Southampton Academy right from the age of 8. I was obsessed with football, wanted to be a footballer. Whenever the school teacher asked me, what's your plan B? I said, I don't have one. I'm going to be a footballer. So I was just completely committed, obsessed, loved the game. So I came right through the academy. I made my debut for the club when I was 19, just turned 19 in the Premier League, which was a huge moment for me and my family. A lot of my family are Southampton fans, born in Southampton. So it was a big moment. So that next year, the club saw fit that I went on loan. So I came on loan to Wycombe. As Simon pointed out, I've been back 3 times since. But I had a great season. I won Player of the Season. The following year, I went to the next division. I did the exact same thing, literally played every minute of every game. I got Player of the Season. And then I got sold to a championship club, which was Barnsley. So I went up north and I went to South Yorkshire. I left home. I moved in with my girlfriend, now wife. And at this point, really, my life was doing this. Like, I'd had a good upbringing. My dad had a really good job. My mum didn't have to work. So I didn't understand the need for God, even when people spoke about God. I sort of shut off from the conversation straight away. My career was doing that, and I thought it was all to do with me. It was all to do with my work, my sacrifice, what I had put in. And I had a very selfish mindset, if I'm being honest. I wanted to earn good money. I wanted to have a good career. And I wanted, like, just people to look at me and think I'm doing well, if I'm being honest. Anyway, so I hadn't had any sort of tribulation, trials in my life at this point. And then the first month when I signed at Barnsley, obviously I'd left home. My uncle passed away. My uncle was kind of like the family hero. He was the light heavyweight boxing champion. He had like the old Lonsdale belt. So that was when you only had one belt in the country. So he was a big hero in my family, someone who I really looked up to and admired, and someone who was trying to keep the family name going. You know, there was a bit of that, and we had a real common respect for each other. And I'd never had to deal with grieving before. All of a sudden, I was away from my family. It was my dad's brother, and my granddad literally passed away, I think, 2 or 3 days later. So my dad, spiraled into depression, and I was grieving, but I couldn't get back to see my dad. So, sort of painting a picture for you, there was this going on. I got held at knife point, which was crazy. I went to see my old team play in Sheffield, me and my friend come out of the stadium, got into our car. They just got us completely wrong. They thought we were these major drug dealers, and I've looked over and all of a sudden this big gang's this guy's got a machete in my friend's face. I'll never forget it. So crazy, I don't know how we got out of that situation, but we did, by God's grace. I know that now. And I got assaulted in a nightclub. This was all within the space of a month of me signing at a new club. So it was mad because I realised really quickly, all of a sudden, that my whole happiness was based on a 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon when I was playing football, because at the moment, my life off the pitch is carnage. There's so much going on. Me and my wife, well, my girlfriend at the time, was starting to have problems. And there was just, it was endless. There was another thing and another thing. Could tell you so much about what happened that year. Anyway, the inevitable happened in football. It's a game of opinions, and the manager dropped me from the team about Christmas time. So all of a sudden, that thing that I was holding my happiness on, and that can be anything for anyone, that could be your job, that could be a person, that could be anything, was taken away from me. And when looking back now, I didn't know at the time, but I was depressed. Couldn't wait to get home and just be in bed. And I was thinking, how can I explain this to people? I was trying to talk to friends about it and stuff at the time, and I was saying, I'm really struggling, blah, blah. And they was like, but your life's great. You're a footballer. You get in at 9, you get back at 2 o'clock, you got the whole day, you get Sundays off, you get Wednesdays off, blah, blah, blah. You're getting paid a good wage. I was lost. I had a massive void in my heart, and I didn't know what it was. But there was a player who was in a very similar position to the club I was at Barnsley, and he was a Christian, and his name was George Moncur. And I always say now, even when I speak to him now, I say he was annoyingly happy all the time. And I thought he was a bit of a phony, if I'm being honest, to start with. He'd always be smiling, and he's from Essex, so he was a proper geezer. He would come up to me and just say, "What, Jace, how you doing, mate? God loves you," and stuff like this all the time. And he would share scripture with me. And sometimes I'd say, "Monks, just give it a rest. I just feel I'm feeling down today," or whatever. And he would always be there for me. And he would always say, I'm praying for you, and stuff like that. I say, "Cheers, mate. Nice one." But it wasn't really doing anything for me. Anyway, really good friends with him now, and he finds it quite funny that I'm now saved and up here talking about the Lord. But because of everything that happened that year, I just was desperate to get back down south, and desperate to just sort of fall back in love with football, really. I've had a really tough year. So I couldn't think of a better club than Wycombe. I loved Wycombe so much. I loved the manager. Some of the boys that I got on really well with were still at Wycombe. So I signed back at Wycombe, and everything was going good on the pitch again. I was playing, but I just felt like something in the back of my head, like a fear that if I come out of the team again, I don't know what's going to happen, how I'm going to be. So I was playing on fear, and I was living on fear a little bit, just in everything that I was doing. And I would never forget it. There was a guy across from me one day when I was in the canteen, and I was eating lunch, called Alex Samuel. He was here probably this time 2 or 3 years ago, probably because of lockdown. And he was speaking to another guy called Ben Fremper, who's also a believer, about Jesus. And they were having a conversation. And I always say I can't believe how they were talking about him, because it was like he was in the room. It was like they were talking about him like he's their best friend, and that it's someone who you would just see walking down the street. And I'd never heard anyone talk about God like that before. And I just opened up a conversation with them, and I started talking to them. I started asking them questions. And if any of you met Alex, if you get into a conversation with him about God, he's not letting you go without telling you the full gospel like there and then. So anyway, he said, listen, we got to go for coffee. And just really because of how much he wanted to have a coffee with me, I was like, I'll entertain it. He's a new guy at the club. Let's do it. There'll be no harm in doing it. We went for coffee that month. Honestly, I think every day we could. I was hooked. He was talking to me about his journey, about how God had changed his life. And he just told me about Jesus. He just told me about what Jesus had done, about who he is, about what he did. And honestly, when I look back at that time, it's a bit of a blur. But I also remember so much. It just saw God just so... It was my time to know the Lord. And it was like I couldn't deny it. And I wanted to. Like, I'd heard of all these, like, other stories and players at other clubs, and I've heard players talk about other Christians at other clubs, like, yeah, he's proper religious, or like he's like one of them Jesus freaks, like that guy, like. And I thought, am I actually going to be one of them people? Like, is this how it's going? Like, and anyway, I couldn't deny it. There was something that was happening in my heart. I started praying behind closed doors, and things started happening. So I knew that God was talking to me, and I knew that God was calling me. But I still wasn't like ready to like fully commit. And I had a crazy encounter with the Lord. And I was driving one day to go swimming, something I like to do on my day off. And I was playing a gospel song that my friend had sent me, Ben Fremper, the guy who was talking with Alex. And it's not something that I would have normally listened to. But I didn't mind it. I was like, okay, it's quite good. And I heard an audible voice. I heard God's voice. So it came over my right shoulder in the car, and it was really simple. And it just said, son, I love you, and I'm proud of you. And I felt a warmth go from the top of my head down to the bottom of my body. And I just knew in that moment that God was real. I knew that he was calling me. And I knew that he'd been with me the whole time, even though I didn't know it. And I pulled over. I wept like a baby. And I just knew in that moment that everything from this moment forward was going to be for him. And I knew that I just had to get to know him. And I knew that this was the ultimate purpose for my life. And I went home. I said a really simple prayer by my bed. It was just like, God, I believe you. I believe you that you died on the cross for me. And I'm going to live for you. Simple as that. I'm going to live for you. And my family, as I said at the start, weren't believers. So, and they still aren't. So they thought I'd lost it. Like, they thought I'd completely lost the plot. My wife was a whole different kettle of fish. My wife thought I joined a cult. My wife at the start was like, do you know what? She was like, I don't know if any of you have had this one. It's good for you, so you can, it's good for you. You can do it all in your own time, but don't be bringing that on me. Like, that's what she was like. So I was like, okay, no problem. But I couldn't help it. I was coming home from football, or like God was speaking to me through the Bible, stuff, and I was just like, I don't know if you guys have been there. I was just like, I had to tell her. Like, how could I not tell someone about this? Like, so I would just tell her things. I remember I got a prophetic word once. Wow, that was interesting. Came home and said to her, I've got this prophetic word. It was bang on. She just looked at me like I'd fully lost it. I'll never forget it. Thought she was going to split up with me. And I'm leading on to my wife's testimony now. So my wife, one day, I came home and she had like a list on her notes of all the things of why it was a bad idea what I was getting myself into. The list was endless, and she said had a massive personality change. I look back now and I take it as a compliment because I'm a new creation in Christ and I'm born again. So I'm glad that I'm different. But she had a big list, and she basically said, if things don't change, I'm going to have a look at things. And I was like, if at any point now I'm going to deny Christ and I'm going to go back to my old way, it's going to be now, because the woman I love is telling me that I've lost the plot and that I look crazy, and my family are on her side. So I'm just like, okay, like, Lord, you're going to have to do something here. You're going to have to, because at the moment, I can't see how your glory is in this, and I can't see how this is going to work going forward. Anyway, I was praying hard for my wife behind closed doors, and so was Alex. And I remember, like, around 4 or 5 months since this conversation, my wife started asking me questions about the Bible. She started asking me questions specifically about the Old Testament, I remember. I think she was trying to catch me out on a few things. And I just said to her, look, I don't know everything. Like, I've just literally got saved. Why don't you read it? She said, you know what, I will, and you're going to have some questions to answer. So my wife started reading the Bible, and as she was reading it, she was answering her own questions, but God was answering her, and I could see that God was doing a work in her. So I would go in every day and be like to Alex, listen, God's doing something. We need to pray. Like, we need to pray into this. God is doing something. And my wife was completely against this at this point. And just a bit of background to my wife. So my wife, her dad passed away when she was 2. Her mum is a drug addict, was a drug addict when she was carrying Zara. So Zara's my wife. So when Zara was in the womb, everyone said that when Zara comes out, she's going to have issues, she's going to have problems, because her mum was a drug addict. Zara came out and there was no issues whatsoever. There was no problems whatsoever. And also, a bit of context, sometimes what Zara's mum would do is hold Zara as like captive at a drug den while her mum went and got money to come back and pay for the drugs. So my wife's upbringing was very, very interesting, to say the least. And that's just the half of it. Anyway, so my wife had a dream one night, and God woke her up and told her to read Psalms 91. And she'd never read Psalms 91 before. She'd never read that part of the Bible yet. So Zara read it. And if anyone knows Psalms 91, it's a psalm of protection, and it's a psalm of how God will keep us clear from any deadly disease. And Zara just knew at that point that what God was saying to her is that I've protected you all the way along. Like, nothing can touch you because my hand has been upon you. And Zara woke up in the morning, and I woke up to Zara saying, I believe. I was thinking, what happened? Where is it? What time is it? Have I been in a coma? Like, what is going on? Like, and yeah, she said, I believe. She told me what had happened. Very similar to the voice I heard. Zara heard a voice, and it awoke her from her sleep, and she read that, and she knew. And from that point onwards, so Zara knew that at that point we had to be married. We were engaged at the time. We had a wedding booked in Barbados in 2 years' time. We'd sent invites out. We'd paid for the deposit. And Zara said to me, we have to get married now. We have to get married. And I said, okay, everyone's not going to understand. What are my family going to think now? After everything else, what are they going to think now? anyway, we did. 2 weeks later, our pastor got us married. And yeah, crazy journey. And I'd love to answer any of your questions. And since that, by the way, there's been incredible stories of what's happened at Wycombe, at the football club. We have a prayer group. We have players who are so interested in what God's done at the club. And if any of you follow Wycombe, even what's happened with the club in the last few years has been incredible. And the people God has placed at Wycombe has been such a blessing. It's such a unique club in terms of the people that are in it. And even the support and fan base is just incredible. And I think God's hand's been on Wycombe so much. I just feel so blessed to be a part of it. And I just know that I just couldn't do this life without God. And I wouldn't like to know where I would be now if it wasn't for having met him. But he's changed my life. He's changed my wife's life, my family's life, and how we raise our children now. We have 2 amazing children, little George and Elsie. And yeah, just love to answer any of your questions too.
That was oh, I'm falling off the chair now. I've only had one, don't worry. Great, thank you very much for sharing your story and being so vulnerable in that way. We've got a few questions in, but there's still time to send a few more in. I just got one there as well, I think. The first question was a footballing-based question. What was it like to play in the Championship? And then the second part was, what was it like to play without fans?
Yeah, it was brilliant. I've been very fortunate enough to have had a couple of other seasons in the Championship, but it definitely felt more significant doing it with Wycombe. And I think the club really grew as the year went on, as the season went on, in the Championship. And do you know what? It was just the only thing about it was that it was so gutting not to have fans in there, because I really feel like the fans would have made such a big difference at key times. But God has a plan, and I believe that we'll get back there. I believe that the club are in a great position. I think the club are in an even better position now as they were when they went up before. But no, it's great to have fans back in, and football's not the same without fans. You know, life's about people, and it's just great to have them back in.
Great. I'm sure it's great to be back in as well. I haven't actually been back. Anyone been back to a football match since? A few people over that way, yeah. Great. Oh, one over here as well. So what difference does your faith make when you're going for a hard challenge? Started with an easy one, so.
It's a really hard question. It was actually one of the first things I asked Alex and Linvoy Primus as well. As I said, like, do I need to change how I sort of go into challenges now and how I behave on the pitch? Because before I was quite, like, if there was something going on the pitch in terms of like a fight broke out or something, I was normally one of the first over there. So God really changed my heart on that. But you read the Bible, it's constantly about battles, and like, I always think Alex is such a great example in terms of how he plays, and I've learned so much off Alex, how he plays football, is that he works so hard, he goes in for every challenge 100%, but if an opposition player goes down, he's the first to go over there and pick them up and to see if they're okay and show humility straight away. So in terms of how I play, I think, you know, I want to play, you know, on the edge, and I want to play strongly and always give 100%, because then I wouldn't be doing God justice if I wasn't going out there and giving him 100% every time I played and playing for him. And that means challenges as well. But if a player is hurt, or if a player is down, or if a fight does break out, I feel like that's a good opportunity to show humility and to show a different side. that's where, yeah, we can be a real witness.
Great. What would you say to somebody who is wrestling with whether God exists, or wrestling with kind of on the edge of faith?
Do it. No. No. I think I've been there. And what I can only really say is that I've done life with God and I've done life without God. And life with God is 100 times better. And all I would say is you've got nothing to lose as well. If you're on the fence, you obviously feel that there's a void, or you obviously feel that there's something that you're missing out on. And exploring who Jesus is, what he's done, and what he has to offer, I think that when you find that out, you can't really deny it. So, yeah.
Great. How have you found it since Alex left the club?
It's hard, if I'm being honest. I was saying to Benedict, I kind of feel like I'm grieving a bit, and that might sound really silly, just being a person, but Alex has had a huge impact on my life, and he's my best friend. He's someone I speak to daily, and I'm sure you guys can agree, it's so much easier doing things in twos or doing something with someone. So in terms of our Bible study, in terms of even going to things or just being in and around the training ground, me and him would just be like glue, like constantly stuck together, and we'd often get a lot of banter about it as well. So you can imagine what it's been like the last week or so. You know, the lads have been on me, like, where's your best friend and stuff like that. So yeah, I miss him, but Benedict gave me some really good advice and just said, you know, look at it from the kingdom's perspective, and you know, the seeds he's sown at Wycombe and what he, you know, sometimes I've looked at it from his perspective, and when he came to Wycombe and how he's left Wycombe, I just think, wow, like you know, what God's done for Alex is incredible, and I'm really excited to see what he's going to do for him at Scotland. I'm just gutted it's Scotland. Like, why can't it be half an hour down the road? Like, I've got to get an aeroplane.
Yeah, Ross County is a long way away, isn't it? So, yeah. Do you believe your faith has made you a better player?
It's definitely changed my mindset. And I feel like I play differently now. Whether I'm a better player or not, that's for other people to decide. But definitely not a left back. But yeah, I think it's definitely changed my mindset in terms of how I go into games. I feel less pressure. I feel less nervous. I still feel it, but I don't. My mindset's different. I believe that when I go out on the pitch now, I'm playing for God, and I'm not playing for the audience of 6,000, 10,000. I'm playing for the audience of one, and that's God. And that's been a massive change for me. So I go into games now just feeling free. I go into games just excited more so to see what God's going to do in the game. I'm less fearful of getting injured. I'm less fearful of messing up and making a mistake. When I used to make a mistake in the game, it would sit with me for weeks. And now, if I do make a mistake, God still loves me. He's not judging me on my performance, you know, and it's changed everything, if I'm being honest. So it definitely made an impact.
We'll do 2 more questions and then we'll have dessert. So this one says, bearing in mind how publicly Christian Wycombe have been, do you have plans post-football? And then it does say, to be fair, albeit a long way off, God willing. So they did caveat it, thankfully. So.
Yeah, I was just talking with Mike before I came on, actually. about life after football. I mean, I'm 25. I'm trying not to think too far ahead, and tomorrow's got enough worries of its own. So, look, I've definitely got a passion for football. I love the game. The sides of the game I don't like as much that maybe people don't see, but I do have a real passion for football, and I feel like I've got something to offer in football. But I just love telling people about Jesus. I just do. It's just like Alex makes a really good analogy of when people come to faith, they dip their toe in at the start. He says I did like a full-on bomb into the water, and I just can't seem to stop. Like, I just keep going further in, and I don't know what that looks like. God knows. I don't know whether that's still in football. Talking to people about my faith, whether it's something completely on the other end of the spectrum. I mean, I wasn't expecting Alex to go to Ross County, and then 2 weeks later he's in Scotland. So God knows. I don't know. I'm not going to really try and work it out, but I'm open to do whatever he's calling me to do.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got a long way to go in your career, so don't worry. Maybe you could be on this side in like 15 years. And so, last question. Do you know anything about the Alpha course? Have you been involved with the Alpha course before? And what was your experience, if you have?
Yeah, I've done Alpha. Me and my wife done Alpha. It was in the middle of all of that, what was going on about me and my wife. So I got saved, and then I jumped on Alpha. So my pastor told me about it. He said, listen, like, you're there, but you don't really know too much. So Alpha would be great for you. So I jumped on it. I loved it. Like, couldn't wait for it every Wednesday. I still speak with the group now. Me and my wife still speak with our group, and that was like nearly 4 years ago. So for one, there's amazing relationships for Alpha, for the people on the course. And you're all kind of in the same boat, really. So you're all like, you have questions. Some may be leaning more towards it than others, but it's funny because you see some who really aren't and then do. And but yeah, I did it. I absolutely loved it. It answered so many questions for me. It made it a lot clearer for me in how it was explained in terms of, like, why do we pray? How do you read the Bible? Like, what is the importance of the Bible? Because I'll be honest, the first time I picked up a Bible, I just looked at it and I was like, I think I've read one footballer's autobiography before. Like, where do I start? I don't understand why they're talking like in this English. Is there another translation for me, please? And it really helped me. People spoke to me through that and showed me. And then my wife jumped on like the last 3 weeks of it. So it was so funny because the people on my Alpha course, I was telling them about my wife, and then towards the end of it, she was on it. So, but Alpha was amazing. And I would recommend it if anyone's not done it. And even if you do believe and you've been a believer for a long time, I still think it's really good. I want to do more Alpha courses. And my wife's just about to start running one, which is awesome.
We've got one coming up here if you're interested. So, great. Can we show Jason our appreciation, please? So dessert is going to come out in a moment, and then we've got an interview with someone who did Alpha last time round, and then our evening will be over after that. So desserts will come round to your table in a moment, and I will come round and collect up your little quizzes.